In a previous video, I beat Pokemon Fire Red using the 6 most common Pokemon in Kanto, but there were some, let's say, healthy disagreements about how to include fishing encounters. So here, I will use only the 6 most common walking encounters. To determine which they are, I will add up all of their encounter rates in every distinct map, including their evolutions, and call this number the common rate. Just like before, the Sevi Isle routes are not included, in addition to a few other rules. So let me know, which 6 walking encounters do you think are the most common in Kanto? To begin with, I choose the most common US name over the past 100 years, James. My rival, on the other hand, takes pride in not being a commoner. I'm anxious to head into the grass for our first walking encounter, but Oak won't have it. Not only does he stop me from getting some common Pokemon, he thrusts this leafy dino upon me. This is not common at all. You can tell this was a bad move, as I immediately lose to Jigglypuff, but that doesn't count as a whiteout since I don't scurry to the Pokemon Center. After getting a Pokedex and balls, finally the run can officially begin. In the grass on Route 1, I find the most common walking encounter in all of Kanto, Rattata, with a common rate of 470. He seemed like the appropriate starter. The only problem is, this basic mon has run away. If I'm going to be forced to use this rat for the entire game, I need one with guts, both literally and metaphorically. So let's try a second rat. Not basic, still has run away. Okay, 3rd time's the charm. This isn't a Nuzlocke or anything, so it doesn't really matter. Finally, I get a brave gutsy Rattata. Not too shabby. With a mon I can actually use, I get rid of Bulbasaur and the Scaredy Rat. Gutsy and I then encounter and catch a Pidgey, the 4th most common walking encounter with a rate of 390. But we're not done yet. Route 22 is home to yet another normal flyer in Spearow, who is just under Pidgey at spot 5 with 335. Already, this video is way different than the previous common video, since I actually have 3 usable mons against Brock. That's quite an improvement, or at least it would be if they weren't all normal types. To get some much needed experience, I compare my team to Jigglypuff's. He starts with a common bird against my rat. Now in real life, it's clear the bird would win this fight and then eat said rat. But Gutsy is not about to be eaten here, though he is soon scratched to death by a fire lizard. Not Pidge the Spearow easily takes it out, and my rival stood no chance. The Viridian Forest is home to mainly only bugs, and as common as they are here, in the rest of Kanto, they're actually at number 19, so not all that common. Pikachu is even more rare at spot 27, with a grand total common rate of 44. Just wait though, we'll find even more rare Pokemon soon enough, and we won't use them. First, let's head to the Rock Gym, and this is gonna suck. Before wiping out against Brock, I decide to battle his lackey, Camper Liam, first. Guts tail whips a number of times, and does decent damage, but this Geodude spams Defense Curl, making this a horrible encounter. After he dies, Spearow, oh so slowly, takes out the rock with Pex. He then falls to Sandshrew, bringing out my last Pokemon, who barely wins. This does not bode well for Brock. What's even worse is Liam doesn't seem to understand trash talk. You don't call your friends hot. That's like the exact opposite of the bro code. If he's trying to distract me, well, it worked, because now all I can think about during this battle is hot Brock. Thankfully, I formed a Brock plan before Liam's mind games. It's a cheap one, granted, but it's all I've got. Pidgey starts by spamming 6 sand attacks as Geodude uses Harden. Once his eyes are filled with dirt, Spearow comes out to growl several times at the blind rock. Now even if he does hit with Tackle, which he does sometimes, it still should do minor damage. Now it's my turn to start dealing some damage. And by some, I mean like a single hit point. Sometime later, the rock has hit Spearow a number of times, but dies to 20 little pecks. Which just goes to show you, even something as insignificant as a peck can eventually crack open a Geode. His victory is short-lived though, as Onix immediately Rock Tombs. That's too bad. Pidgey then returns and manages to get 4 sand attacks before also being Rock Tombed. Now it's all down to Gutsy, but he has Tail Whip to lower Onix's defense. After several whips, Quick Attack was still quite pathetic, so I end up Tail Whipping 6 times to maximize Quick Attack damage. It's still not great by any stretch of the imagination, but in the end, Guts, against all odds, does win, being the sole survivor of our first gym battle, which honestly went way better than I expected. I was certainly prepared for a whiteout or two here. With Brock defeated and the badge in hand, I leave him and Liam alone to do whatever it is they want to do in the privacy of their own gym. It's no concern of mine. On the way to Mount Moon, I run around till I encounter Jigglypuff, one of the rarest walking encounters in the game, with a whopping 10 common rate. This is in stark contrast to the by far most common Pokemon, Magikarp. But since I'm doing specifically walking encounters, he doesn't count. If you want to see a video where he does count, and you arguably see way too much of Magikarp, then check out my previous most common video. And be sure to like and subscribe to the channel while you're there. Inside Mount Moon, everyone's favorite cave dweller, Zubat, makes an appearance. She comes in just above Pidgey with a rate of 428. Since this is a Kanto game, I will not allow him to evolve to Crobat, because it's not a Kanto Pokemon per se. Also, Gen 3 Zubat really sucks at the start, with 2 crappy moves that don't even benefit from stab. It's always fun raising one of these things. Before leaving Mount Moon, I want to highlight 2 more Pokemon. First is Paris, who is the only encounter you can get on this floor and just barely missed out on being in this video. It is the 7th most common walking encounter. Geodude was also pretty close, just behind Paris at number 8. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the least common encounter so far, Clefairy, with a 7 common rate. She is actually the second least common walking encounter in the entire game, with the first being a multiple way tie. We'll talk about that later. Sandshrew and Ekans, depending on your version, are also decently common, coming in right under Geodude at spot 9. It's around this time that we have our first evolution. Pidgey becomes a slightly larger Pidgey. Anyway, we've learned a lot there, but let's get back to the fighting. I'm fairly confident my current team cannot beat Misty, even with that increase in size, but I try anyways because I'm already here. Rattata Hyperfangs Staryu, and would have won in 2 hits if it weren't for Harden. He does still win, after getting water pulsed pretty hard. The second star is obviously too much for my little rat. I had hoped that Pidgeotto would survive 2 water pulses to sand attack here, but he only gets a single one. Bronze the Zubat is immediately knocked out, no surprise there, leaving it all up to Spearow. All he has to do is dodge like 10 or 15 water pulses. That's not too much to ask, is it? He's off to a good start on the first one, but that's as far as he goes. That's fine. Like I said, I didn't expect to win. Let's take the frustration from my first loss out on Jimothy and his stupid, ridiculous name. I start with Zubat, who immediately swaps to Pidgeotto. She just needs the experience. My bird easily defeats his, and his common rat is beaten too. Gutsy then hyperfangs his Charmander, before letting Zubat astonish this quite rare Abra to death, which is one of the few things she can actually do on her own. With Jimothy out of the way, I head north past Nugget Bridge to find our next encounter, Bellsprout, who comes in at spot number 6 with a rate of 280. To be completely honest here, I generally prefer to use the Oddish line over Bellsprout, but you all chose this sprout instead, so LeafGreen it is. With a now grass type, Misty should be a bit easier. I still start with Rattata, who now beats Staryu in 2 Hyperfangs. He also survives Starmie's Swift and manages to quick attack twice. Again, Pidgeotto sand attacks a single time before falling. Bellsprout should be able to win in 2 Vine Whips here, as long as she isn't crit. She heals Confusion with a Person Berry, and does knock out Starmie for the win. Yay! Good job, little Sprout. Before continuing our journey, I want to highlight another special Pokemon in Diglett's tunnel. Surprise, surprise, I'm talking about Diglett. Between him and Dugtrio, these guys have a 100 common rate, which isn't bad, but this is literally the only map they can be found on, so not really among the most common mons. Even though they are frequently used to beat up Surge because they're literally right there. While on this Fight Club boat, I should not have said that, we have several more evolutions. 2 of my Flyers and my little Sprout. Not that the previous fight was that difficult, but now Jimothy is likely to be even easier. As a matter of fact, Not Pidge, with a stab boosted secret power, easily knocks out all of his Pokemon single-talonedly. If that wasn't a saying before, well, it is now. Thankfully, I have some Pokemon who can learn Cut, so I don't need to catch anything else right now. As easy as that rival battle was, Surge should still be pretty tough. After all, 3 of my Pokemon are flyers. Fearow survives Voltorb's Shockwave well enough, knocks it out with a secret power. Pikachu too. Raichu is another matter entirely. I try to be clever, teaching Raticate Dig. He also evolved, by the way, but he just keeps on missing. He eventually does hit with it, followed up by a quick attack, defeating Surge without even needing my electric-resistant Pitcher Plant. I get through Rock Tunnel and encounter Jimothy again. This time, joking and making light of death. That's pretty dark for a kid's game. Once again, his Pidge is easily defeated by my not Pidge. Thanks to an intimidating most common Pokemon, I swapped to Raticate to Hyper Fang a few times. Execute is double Hyper Fanged, Kadabra only once, and then Fearow comes back out to Secret Power Charmeleon for the win. Looking for Cubone, are you, Jimothy? They're pretty rare, just above Pikachu, actually, with 61 points. But that's not important right now. What is a Leaf Stone for last place. Not that she's going to evolve for a long while yet. It's just good to be prepared. Because Fearow has been doing so much of the work lately, I decide to keep him busy. He seems to be effective after all. Erica's Victory Bell is one-shot thanks to a crit, and Tangela survives just long enough to poison him. Which is fine by me, since that means Vileplume can't paralyze, helping me save a Cherry Berry. Either way, Erica, with her Grass Mons, had no way to beat my Flyers. Speaking of, it's now time to teach one of them Fly. Only Pidge and Not Pidge can learn it, but since Not Pidge will get Drill Peck in a little while, let's instead give it to Pidgeotto. For the Giovanni battle, Weeping Bell easily Vine Whips his 2 Rock Ground Pokemon, no problem. She paralyzes Kangaskhan before swapping to Raticate, who is critical punched right in the face. That wasn't fair. Fearow gets lucky and just barely manages to knock it out thanks to paralysis. This gets me the Silph Scope, and I head to Saffron to get the Psychic TM. Now we're ready for the final Pokemon, Ghastly. Since each floor of the Pokemon Tower is a different map with slightly varying encounters, Ghastly is actually the second most common walking encounter with a rate of 454, just a tad below Rattata. In the previous video, I slightly miscalculated his common rate. I'm not sure how, but this is the correct spot for him. I also want to highlight another special encounter, this Marowak here. Since you can't actually catch her, this is kind of like a trainer battle instead of a wild encounter, but she is one of the only required encounters, meaning you cannot get through the game without seeing her. The only other required encounter I can think of in Kanto is of course Snorlax. You cannot beat the game without fighting at least one of them, assuming you don't use glitches of course. Fatso though is catchable, or you can run away depending on your mood. This brings us to the Safari Zone, which has the rarest walking encounters in the game. Pinsir, Chansey, Tauros, Kangaskhan, you get the idea. They all have a common rate of 5. Combined with the ridiculous Safari Zone catch mechanic, they are the antithesis to everything this video is about. Still, when I find a Chansey, just by chance, I throw a few Safari Balls just in case, and she runs away like they always do. Below the Safari Zone Pokemon, we have like a 19-way tie between the Pokemon who cannot be found in the wild. Many are static encounters, like the legendary birds and Mewtwo, or the Hitmons. Others are only obtainable through trading, like Lickitung here, which, I might add, is a horrible trade. Lickitung really sucks. Slowbro is actually halfway decent, even though he is slow as dirt. Anyway, this brings us to the Koga battle, but by now fully evolved Gengar is far more than he can handle. Runner-up, Psychics, and defeats all of Koga's Pokemon without even getting hit. Some might call that a perfect battle. And if you thought that was good, check out Gutsy's battle against Jimothy. I've decided to activate Guts now because he kind of needs it. With all the other Pokemon fully evolving, he's lagging behind. A Guts boosted return takes out his first 2 Pokemon, even with an Intimidate. Charizard is just a bit too strong for him though, and apparently Fearow too. And almost Pidgeot. Jeez, that Zard is strong. She then fails to one-shot these eggs, and also falls. This is not going the way I expected. Golbat defeats them, and even bites Alakazam to death as it spams Future Sight. That works for me, I suppose. The end result is a win, but it took half of my team to do it. Giovanni is quite a bit easier, since I once again have a poisoned rat. Nidorino falls to a dig, return would have worked just as well, and Nidoqueen is crit. Kangaskhan takes 2 hits as Gutsy avoids a Mega Punch, getting revenge for their previous encounter. Last, Rhydon is dug twice, as Gutsy soloed that battle with only 4 HP left. Now let's see how he does against Sabrina. He's off to a great start, knocking out her first 3 Pokemon with returns. For Alakazam, he does have a Quick Claw to hopefully outspeed, but apparently not. To slow down that Mon, I use Fearo's secret power, which immediately paralyzes. That's also reflected back onto my bird, but he is a sacrifice I'm willing to make. Not Pidge was unwilling, apparently, defeating Alakazam without even getting hit. Well, I guess that paralysis was unneeded. At this point, I will be forced to capture a new Pokemon since none of these guys can surf. Oh well, I made it pretty far with only those 6. While making my way to Cinnabar, Weepinbell gets to level 42 and learns Razor Leaf, which is his last grass move. I've been waiting for that, so now finally she can evolve. Before fighting Blaine, I want to vent real quick about these remakes. I do love Fire Red and Leaf Green, I'm a huge fan, but for whatever reason, there are 2 Pokemon who used to be found here in the Pokemon Mansion back in Red and Blue who no longer are. Magmar and Ponyta. Granted, Magmar was only in half of the games, but still. In these remakes, these very Kanto Pokemon can no longer be found in Kanto proper. You have to go to the Sevi Isles to get them, meaning, in my calculations, they have encounter rates of 0. I don't understand this change in the slightest. It's just another way to make fire Pokemon even harder to get. And if we learned anything from my previous video, it's that water Pokemon are much too common. Game Freak seems to have a preference here, just saying. That's enough of that, let's battle against Blaine. Not Pidge starts with a Rain Dance to obviously lessen the fire damage. Growlithe is then knocked out with Drill Pecks. Ponyta does get a crit Fire Blast, unfortunately, but still falls. On his last turn, Fearo now sacrifices himself to Rain Dance against Rapidash. Gutsy easily knocks out that Sevi Isles horse. Thanks to Intimidate, Arcanine takes less than half from a return, so I pivot into Pidge instead, whose Fly was quite weak and gets knocked out. Her sacrifice lets Raticate return to return 2 times, winning the 7th badge. Bill then tries me to ditch Kanto for an island vacation, where I could see those aforementioned Fire Mons, but even with the Sevi Isles encounter rates, they wouldn't even be close to becoming common Pokemon. So I pass, instead poking my unconscious bird with a stick to activate some Flight Reflex to fly me to Viridian. There ain't no rest for the fainted after all. For the final gym battle, I would like Victreebel to win this all on her own, but we'll see. She starts off by Razor Leafing the 2 Rhyhorns no problem. For Dugtrio, she uses Sunny Day, activating Chlorophyll, and then a single growth to boost her special attack. Next, obviously, it's time to Solar Beam. The 3-headed mole, followed by the Queen, and ultimately, the King. They all fall to a single Miracle Seed Solar Beam. Yeah, that's basically how I wanted that fight to go. This brings us to the second to last Jimothy battle. It'll be nice to stop saying that ridiculous name. His Pidge and my not Pidge face off, with mine being the victor. His Rhyhorn is also Razor Leafed, but Victreebel is then sacrificed to Alakazam. 2 quick attacks from Gutsy, and he gets revenge on this Psychic Mon. This isn't the one who defeated him, but who cares about little things like that. Execute is knocked out with Return. Gengar then has Thunderbolt to defeat Gyarados, and finally the Charizard too. After getting through Victory Road, there's nothing left to do but start the Elite Four Gauntlet. First, as always, is Lorelei, whose Dugong survives the first Thunderbolt by Gengar, but only safeguards like a dweeb with a pocket protector. Gengar is hit with a Surf from Slowbro, but it doesn't actually matter. I expected Lapras to either Confuse Ray or just knock out the Ghost, but a crit Thunderbolt takes care of that. Cloyster, and finally Jinx, both fall to a single hit apiece. I didn't expect Gengar to solo the first battle, but he is really awesome, no surprise there. I would like Golbat to do the same thing to Bruno too. That's why I taught her Giga Drain. With a Miracle Seed, the Onix is one-shot. Her reign is short-lived however, as Hitmonchan gets a critical Rock Tomb, and then another tomb for good measure. Well, she beat one of Bruno's Pokemon. That's gotta mean something, right? Fearow defeats the Puncher, and would have also beaten Machamp if it weren't for that stupid Citrus Berry. Oh well, a Poison Raticate defeats Forearms. He then runs away to Gengar, who avoids a Mega Kick to Psychic a few times. The second Onyx is then Razor Leafed, and that's the end of Bruno. For Agatha, I start with Raticate, whose Shadow Ball just barely misses out on the kill. Even with a double team and several healings, Gengar is quickly knocked out. I then pivot to my Gengar to Psychic her Golbat. I then pivot back into Raticate on a Curse, which I'm not a fan of, so I swap again to Golbat to also Shadow Ball. She knocks out Haunter and does something to Gengar, but was asleep for most of that encounter. Raticate proves to be too slow, and Quick Claw does not activate, so he falls to the second Gengar. Runner-Up, on the other hand, defeats it with Psychic and does the same thing to Arbok. It's unfortunate, but with that death, Raticate is not going to be all that helpful anymore. He lost his Guts boost, and there's nothing I can do about it here. Lance leads with a Gyarados that Gengar easily Thunderbolts. He can do the same thing to Aerodactyl, assuming there isn't a crit or an Omni boost. And there wasn't. Nice. This actually puts him in a great spot against the Dragonite to simply use Destiny Bond. Eat it, Lance's strongest Pokemon. Pidge then tries really hard to defeat the first Dragonair, but between getting paralyzed and missing the 95% accurate fly, she just can't do it. Fearow drill picks it to death, and I unveil his secret weapon, Mirror Move, hitting Dragonair with an Outrage that was not nearly strong enough. Oh well, we tried. Raticate's purpose here was a backup to Ice Beam Dragonite. For the airs though, Stab Return is actually a better move. Alright, with Lance down, we have one final battle. First though, I have a plethora of rare candies just burning a hole in my pocket, and I need to use them. I actually used a walkthrough to find like 5 more rare candies I didn't remember. So everyone gets at least one, but my favorite Pokemon, like Gengar, get 2. Like we've done many times before, Jimothy's Pidge and my not Pidge face off. But this time, with the not insignificant level advantage his Pidge has, my bird simply can't win. Apparently, not even Raticate can. So it looks like this is a job for Gengar. Not wanting to risk him to Alakazam, I swap to Pidge, who manages to hit Rhydon as Jimothy pivots. Okay, Victory Bell should be able to handle this Dawn and the Future Sight attack, which is typeless in this generation. And then, she could also miss a Razor Leaf and die. Well, that was fantastic. Guts does a bit of damage with Ice Beam, and then I pivot back to Gengar on an Earthquake. He obviously avoids it, and at this HP, Psychic takes it out. But this brings us right back to Gengar versus Alakazam. Thanks to the badge boost, more than likely, Gengar actually outspeeds, which I was concerned about, and one-shots with a Shadow Ball. Okay? Gyarados is then Thunderbolted. Golbat tries to beat Executor, but fails quite miserably, all things considered. Pidgeot also tries, and ultimately fails to knock it out too. Her death leaves me with only 2 options here, an almost dead Raticate or my Gengar. I decide the best option is to use Gengar. A Shadow Ball defeats the Coconuts at this HP, bringing out Jimothy's last Pokemon, a super over-leveled Charizard. Gengar still outspeeds, and the best move I can use is, obviously, a Destiny Bond, which works perfectly, as the Zard Fire Blast Gengar to death, causing his own downfall. Which means I win, because I still have a barely alive rat in the back. Not the most honorable of wins, perhaps, but I'll take what I can get. With that, I have now beaten the Kanto region using only the 6 most common walking encounters. Again, if you didn't see the previous video where I include all types of encounters to determine who is by far the most common, check that out, because together, these videos kind of give a full idea of what's available in Kanto. I'd like to continue these types of runs in future regions, but let me know if I should break it up like I've done here. Another option is to kind of weight the fishing encounters in a slightly different way, so they're not overrepresented. If you have any ideas on ways we could do that, I am certainly open to options. Regardless, let me know which region you'd like to see next. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next region.